Okay, everyone, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Of course, we have people, I think, from all over the world at the Shaping EDU Winter Games. It's been an absolutely wonderful event, and we look forward to spending some time with you today on our presentation, Learning with Embodied Avatars in the Future. And I'll introduce myself real quick and turn it over to my colleague, my co-worker, co-conspirator, my Georgieva. So I'm Emory Craig. I'm CEO of Digital Bodies Consulting Group in XR and AI, and have a extensive background in higher education and also in creative industries, particularly in arts and museums. So Maya, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, hello everyone. It's great to see you. I am the co-founder of Digital Bodies with Emory Craig, but I'm also the director of Education Futures and the XReality Center at the New School, which is in New York City. And the New School has 5 colleges, including Parsons School of Design. And so a lot of my work ends up being working with, the Parsons students and faculty in thinking about the future of immersive computing. So I'm excited to be here today.
Okay, so let's get started. This is really a forward-thinking presentation. We're really looking at the future, which I think is something that's a hallmark of Shaping EDU in terms of where we will be, not just education, but even the workforce and entertainment industries will be in the future. So we're going to look at some cutting-edge research and some examples of avatars to understand their use and their potential use in learning environments, and also some of the ethical challenges. There's some absolutely fascinating studies that are underway these days in terms of the psychology of avatars, how it affects people, how people put themselves into their avatar, how their avatars affect them, how their avatars affect interactions in virtual environments. So basically that's the sort of layout for the presentation, and we will dive in. Oops, sorry, I went through too fast here. Let me back up to this. It's a wonderful quote here from Lauren Victor. She's now the founder at Bloom. She used to be Oculus product manager before. That we will spend our time in VR, and avatars will be the foundation of our existence in virtual environments. That just as today we spend so much time in social media, it's become kind of a corollary or to our lives. In the future, as we spend more time in virtual environments, avatars will be the foundation of our identity in virtual reality. And I think this goes back to something that Mark Zuckerberg saw at the very beginning and found in purchasing Oculus in 2014. He didn't purchase a technology. He wasn't thinking of VR as a single user technology, but he was thinking of it, as he said, as the next major computing platform, that it would change the way we connect, the way we work, and the way we socialize. And avatars, of course, will be essential to that. The term, just very briefly, some background information here, avatars comes from a Sanskrit term meaning descent, and originally meaning the descent of the gods down onto earth as an apparition of the gods onto earth. Of course, in the digital age, it has come to refer to a virtual embodiment of a person in a virtual space. Probably the movie Avatar was one of the ways it's been popularized in our culture. And there, of course, it becomes a symbol for mobility. It's a second chance for the character Jake. He's able to use his body again. It becomes a symbol for the way technology can allow for other modes of being, can allow for new possibilities of growth. So we'll talk first of all about what's unique to VR. I'll turn this over to Maya, and Maya, I can advance, just let me know when to advance the slides, and then I'll come back onto this.
All right, so we are going to be talking about virtual, augmented, mixed reality. And so in a way that we are on a continuum. And Emory, I'm still seeing the first slide. It's not advanced for you, for me.
You're not seeing the Michael Abish quote?
Um, yes, I am seeing the quote, but I
Okay,
thought that
so
we
go on. Okay, I can go on now. All right.
Yes. So we want to just briefly review here with everybody, just because sometimes this is a diverse group. Even in our session yesterday, there were some folks that it's their first kind of foray into immersive technologies, and others of you who maybe been seeing and looking and engaging with this for some time. But very quickly, virtual reality, you put on a headset and you are transported in a virtual world, which is usually rendered on a computer platform or the game engines like Unity and Unreal. And then we have the idea of 360 video, which is getting a lot of traction, particularly in journalism and storytelling. And that's the idea that you take a 360 camera and you bring it to the world and you take a spherical video. That's something that you can share and people can experience on desktop, on mobile phones, with Google Cardboard, just as shown on this image, which is the least expensive device, or they can also look at it in an expensive headset for the most immersive experience. And then we talk about augmented reality. And today we experience augmented reality by using our phones or tablets and wave them kind of in the air, and we are able to discover digital assets on top of the physical world. They could sort of be service for a number of different purposes, from navigation to delightful and just storytelling. But we're moving into that next category of mixed reality, which is really the use of more sophisticated today headsets and the future glasses. And those glasses are see-through. So you can see holograms to them on top of the physical world or digital assets. But in addition to that, these glasses are equipped with a number of sensors or cameras. And so they actually understand your place in the world. So if things and objects are moving around your space, they're actually aware of where you are in the space, where, the one who wears the glasses. They're also aware of the physical surroundings and the entire environment within the space. So as it's shown on this image, the elephant toy like walking on top of the desk. So when the elephant reaches the end of the desk, it's not going to just continue to walk in thin air, but it will be aware that this is the edge and will need to basically jump down on the ground in order to continue to walk. So this new category of mixed reality is something which is what we're prototyping for, a world where you'll be able to you'll be able to be in virtual reality experience, fully immersive, to experiences that will bleed into reality. And of course, we use this other word as a community and a field, XR, which stands for extended reality. And that is usually the umbrella term for all things. So as things change, as the technology continues to mature between different headsets and glasses and ways we can experience immersion, so the ways we can facilitate that, and it will change also the way we reference that new language of this new medium, immersive, and sometimes called spatial computing. So next slide, Emory. So let me just preview very quickly a few terms as we speak about virtual reality and just immersive experiences. And the first one is this idea of immersion. And immersion in virtual reality experience is the perception that you, the participant, are physically there, whenever there may be. So for any virtual reality storyteller, the goal is to create such a high degree of immersion that users or viewers aren't caught up thinking, man, this is school experience, but they're just too busy to participate in what's happening around them. So at the peak of immersion, audiences experiences a sense of presence. And Emory, if we can move to the next slide. And presence is the idea that you really physically there. You have the emotional reaction of of actively participating rather than passively watching. And this is why creators of virtual reality talk about these pieces as experiences, as storyscapes or ambient stories, as opposed to movies or films, because we step into these new worlds and we're about to participate in them. So this is the idea of being present. And the most powerful feeling in immersion, in terms of immersive stories, is the sense of presence that we can now have. And the peak of sense of presence is the moment when we actually have the opportunity to have agency. If we can go to the next slide, Emory. And agency, simply put, is the ability to do something in the experience, to interact or react, rather than simply perceive and view. So in a movie, the director has tweaked and modulated the composition, the length, the color, the sound of every shot to usher us through their specific vision of the story, right? We step into of something that is very well directed and curated. But in immersive experiences, we are basically walking into much more as explorers. We have the opportunity to discover. We have the opportunity to act within these stories and embody. And I think this is really what's very interesting when we continue on this presentation in talking about avatars, because oftentimes in virtual reality, we embody an avatar in order to move and play and touch sort of the virtual world. Next one. So a couple of other features I want to touch upon before we move into just speaking about avatars, and that are key to virtual reality and virtual worlds. And the first one is embodiment. And this is the idea that, basically you have a full body experience in virtual reality. And you may be having different bodies, not just one that is to your likeness, like, similar to who you are. And we'll discuss a couple of examples. You may embody not only people from different ethnic or gender, but also different beings. And that's really interesting. But it's that sense of embodiment that that you're moving within space versus being pinned to a computer screen, sort of a window, the way we're experiencing this today through Zoom. And then the next one is the idea of perceptual fidelity. And that is the idea that in the virtual world, virtual interactions mimic the physical world. And they not only mimic, but they activate the same neural pathways in the brain. So think about it, when you travel and you go to a hotel and you check in the night before, and in the morning you will go out to pick up something, and in the morning you come back, you come back in the morning, get out of your hotel, and you almost kind of, your body starts moving when you do it the first morning and the next morning, and because your neural pathways are starting to form. And so as similar things, if you're in virtual reality and you experience things there, they then transfer to the real world. But what makes them even more, I think, both efficient and impactful is the idea that we can do on-demand repetition. And in particular, I put this one because it does relate to education, right? So what do we always want to have our students have? Active participation. We want them to be active learners. We want them to be able to practice things. Well, guess what? Virtual reality is perfect for that because it allows us to do this on demand, multiple times, as many times needed as sufficient. So that is brings me to the next one. Once we can do that, what we can do in virtual reality, when all designed effectively, is the idea of feedback. Not only can we have these on-demand experiences, but we can see how our decisions, like our decision process, will impact the direction on the impact of the experience, and ultimately learn from that. Give us an opportunity to reflect and see multiple outcomes from the multiples entry we actually enter this in these virtual experiences. And the final ones is something that I just talked about, the emotional fidelity. We know that learning is a social process, but not only is a social process, is we get emotionally motivated and invested, and that's what puts us in a sense, in a place of flow when we learn best. And so emotional fidelity is also that idea of the sense of presence with a person or with another avatar. And that is like basically a space which also creates an emotional response to things. So just wanted us to review that as we start this conversation about avatars and think about avatars in the virtual worlds, to also be mindful of what happens, what is taking place in these worlds. So next. So I think that really sums it well with this quote from Jeremy Bailison. We shouldn't fathom virtual reality as a media experience. We should fathom it as a human experience, right? All these things, all this research that is taking place right now, all the things that we experience and then we come back and think about them, they impact us. We remember them. We like to talk about, the things that we experience in virtual reality. At the moment, there are even people, just as what's happened in this pandemic, that probably met for the very first time in virtual worlds. And they now have different opportunities and types to have a different type of relationship. And I think that one of the outcomes actually of this pandemic, maybe sort of our more general sense of comfort with being embodied by an avatar. Next page.
Okay.
So at this point, I'm going to also give it back to you, Emory.
Okay, I'll take over for a bit and then we'll go back to you, Maya. So let's just very quickly look at some developments in avatars because the technology is changing rapidly, and it's very fascinating how this is going. Facebook has done just absolutely astonishing work here. And if you look back to the early days of this in VR, Facebook's first avatar VR, and on the left is kind of just a ghostly apparition. And it's just over 3 years or so, 4 years, it just progressed very rapidly from that to what are still sort of cartoon-like characters, but ones that actually reflect the personality of the individuals they represent. And so as you look at this, the thing to really consider here, I think, is to think about how much more accurate avatars will be, how much more lifelike they will be 3 or 4 years down the road. It's always so hard to see the future, and we think we always, with it, it's the Bill, I think it was a Bill Gates quote that we overestimate the amount of change that will take place in 1 year. We underestimate the amount that will take place in 10 years. But what's happening here is that avatars are rapidly developing, and that's going to have a huge impact on us and our learning environments. What has begun to happen, which is good to see, is that we're finally getting some culturally appropriate avatars. They initially came out. There was a lot of, I guess you could call it a Silicon Valley sort of approach to this, and a male approach to this, which was not that good. It's getting a little better now. Facebook released a whole series of culturally appropriate avatars in India in June 2020. And this is critically important. I mean, just to give you an example, we've been working with an NGO, Echo Peace, in the Middle East, and it's an absolutely amazing organization that comprised people from Israel, from Jordan, and from Palestine areas, and they were using an immersive space, and they really need culturally appropriate avatars. It's just not, you couldn't just have these kind of same stock standard images that was initially being produced by companies. So it's good to see these changes, and of course we need to see even more of them, and we will. In terms of lifelike avatars, we can do them now. It's just very challenging. The technology is expensive and huge. Facebook's lab in Pittsburgh is doing just breathtaking work on this, but basically you're setting someone inside almost like a large machine with a lot of cameras, and it's basically capturing that person from every single angle. And of course you really couldn't even use that in a virtual experience, because the massive amounts of data that would have to be transmitted would just be too much right now. But down the road, of course, we will get there. It's years away right now, but I think we can expect that to be in our headsets at some point. And Facebook is also doing some work, not just with the full body avatars, but just capturing faces. And I think it's just incredibly important. There's a very quick video here that I can just play part of. And this gives you an example. This is just people using headsets and just doing the headsets here with sensors in the headsets. You can see that it's capturing the full person. They're talking to each other. You see their expressions. You see their eye movements. You obviously see the movement of their head. And that's, of course, a level of realism in avatars that's just absolutely astonishing. And while we're not there yet, we're going to be there in I think in the not that distant future. So at this juncture, we're going to shift our perspective and we'll take a look at the impact of VR and avatars on the self, on us, on our learning environments. And Maya, do you want to talk about the tree experience?
Absolutely. Yeah. So as we just mentioned, not only do we think about avatars as human beings, but particularly the tree experience was something that was premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival about a few years back now. But it was one of the experiences where you actually can embody something else, can give you a completely different perspective. And that's what's unique about VR, that you can see worlds that you normally don't see or you're not part of, whether you're in the, in the space of a cell, or you can visit worlds like the universe that are just completely, mind-blowing to us in terms of its size, origin, and phenomena. But tree was something else. In tree, actually, you embody another living form. You embody, in the example of the tree experience, you start as a seed, deep into the ground, and you push your way through the soil. And you literally experience that as being in the headset. You grow until you actually tower above the forest. The experience is set in the Amazon rainforest. And you get to see that, and you get to feel how your branches actually push against the branches of other trees. And soon, at that point, they were also using sensory experiences. So you can actually smell, the way, ground, you can smell sort of ground in dirt, like in spring, as things begin to bloom and blossom. Soon though, as you kind of become a full-grown tree, and your perspective keeps changing from just seeing a shimmer of light of the world to actually towering on top of the rainforest. But then you are suddenly you hear the sound of chainsaws and the smell of smoke. And of course, we know what that's happening. The Amazon rainforest is burning. And you're suddenly seeing it not from the standpoint of a human being, but from the perspective of the tree itself. You want for this destructive force to stop. Not just as a concept, but in reality, it's getting closer. The sound is getting closer to you. The vibrations are getting close to you. It feels like you will be destroyed. And I've experienced this. You do start to feel that this is about to happen with your full body. And this is a very interesting phenomenon that you experience, which is very abstract changes. Otherwise, you actually have in virtual reality and through multi-sensory inputs, you can actually experience this behavior. So what's fascinating here is linking this with the work of others like Audrey Krakow and colleagues at the University of Duisburg-Essen in Germany. And they've done studies on the way humans take on ownership of humans versus non-human bodies, such as those of tigers or bats or spiders. And the research indicates that the experience of being inside a non-humanoid avatar body is more convincing than that of owning a humanoid body, which is really fascinating. So the more alien the body, the more convincing it feels. especially also with things that have wings and flying. And I don't think this is, intuitive. Like, I think this is something that is more like an interesting outcome of this research. That's why it will be interesting how we actually perceive avatars at the end of this pandemic. And then, Emory, I'm going to, bounce it back to you.
Okay. Yeah, that is very fascinating research, because you would think that if you're in an immersive environment as a spider, it just wouldn't be all that convincing. But it turns out that people actually get into that more than seeing themselves as a human body. So interesting stuff there. One of the most successful uses of VR today in terms of a program is the VR exposure therapy program that is run at University of Southern California. It's actually at a large number of veterans hospitals and other universities, run by Skip Rizzo. And that has basically they've been working with Iraq, Afghanistan veterans who have returned with combat-related PTSD, and they go through traditional therapy first, but when that doesn't work, they put them into virtual environments, and they're there as avatars, and it's just utterly fascinating, because the Skip Rizzo said they actually have to downplay the realism. They almost make it more game-like. They could make it more realistic, but it's so powerful as is. And the program has just been so successful in working with soldiers that have come back that are just, of course, holding things inside them from events they've been through, watching friends be injured or possibly die, and thinking that they could have helped or they couldn't, or how they should have done something different, and beating themselves up over it. And they just, they basically recreate the experience for the soldier and put them back into it. And then they work with a licensed therapist who can help them resolve these issues. And probably, again, the most successful use of XR today. And we can move from that into the psychological impacts of avatars, where all of the stuff becomes really fascinating, because the studies here are just beginning. We're getting a lot of fascinating results, but we need more studies, obviously, but there's just such intriguing stuff going on here. A good part of it coming out of Stanford University, Jeremy Bailenson and like that, has done extensive work in what's known as the Proteus effect, which the behavior of an individual is changed by their avatar, either by the characteristics of their avatars or by the activities of their avatars. Researchers have found that participants who saw their own avatars running were more likely to exercise after they left the VR lab than participants who saw somebody else's avatar exercising, or if they just saw themselves hanging out in a virtual room. There's actually already a set of augmented reality glasses and a running app that does something like this. It helps runners by giving you a virtual avatar of someone to run with, because of course we'll run faster, we'll run better if we're running with other people, and you can kind of program that avatar to push you harder if you want. And you can see this down the road where, in the future learning environments, we'll have AI-driven avatars that will be designed to coach us and push us, not just for physical exercise, but for learning. Another study that was done on this, a very fascinating one, of course, is where students saw older versions of themselves, and it changed their behavior in terms of thinking about saving for future retirement. It's really hard to talk to a 22-year-old about saving for retirement. It's another thing when that 22-year-old can see themselves at 62. So it's just... It's just really fascinating in terms of this. And they also looked at the results when they put users into taller, more beautiful avatars. They acted more confidently, not only inside the immersive environments, but when they came back out into the real world. And then they put them on dating apps or had them do a scenario where they were negotiating for a higher salary. And the people that had the avatars that were taller, that seemed more confident, acted more confident in real life. Avatars can also be used for experiences to create empathy. And this is it's a really kind of controversial issue here. I see a lot of people talk about the ability of XR to create empathy. There are others that say, no, I I'm kind of mixed. I'm somewhere in the middle of this. It was very popularized by Chris Melk back in around 2016, when he was misquoted on it. He was misquoted as saying VR is an empathy machine, and he actually said VR could be an empathy machine, but it really does have the possibility of putting you into someone else's shoes. In this experience here, there's what is like a virtual mirror, and you can see yourself as a person of another race, another cultural background, or someone from a different economic background. And it does seem to, again, we're not sure of the lasting effect, but it can have a very powerful effect. And again, the real question becomes, is that lasting when you take the headset off, or is it not? There's the wonderful VR experience, old one right now, John Hull's Notes on Blindness, where someone who was going blind did detailed accounts of it. And of course, when you're in the experience, it's absolutely an incredible experience to go through. People have also said, but of course, you can take the headset off at the end and you have your eyesight back. So it's not the same thing. On the other hand, when you're in it, it is very powerful, and it gives you a very different appreciation of what he went through. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Maya, right? In terms of avatars, social VR, and learning environments, and the rise of social VR.
Yes, and a major development over the past year has been the use of social VR platforms. Many of you may be familiar, and I'm sure remember, Second Life was an early version of social space, not fully immersive, but you can access it through a screen. It was interactive and incorporated a considerable user agency, and of course had many issues. Well, Outspace VR started in 2013, then VR Chat, another social network, 2014, and in many other would followed, like a number of different platforms that exist today, and some that cease to exist. We are at the early stages of I think, of this VR revolution, but they've all been supercharged by the global pandemic. And as we look for new ways to connect with students and with colleagues and with each other, they all added a powerful psychological and an interactive dynamic to immersive environments. And Outspace VR, you can access it. They've changed so many times how you can access it. For example, you can access on every so often you access you could on a desktop, but the majority of people enter this world is actually on a VR headset, like the Oculus Quest headsets. And same with VR Chat, and same with some of the other platforms that exist today. And they still have quite a lot of challenges. But what they've done is they're starting to adapt. Like, for example, Outspace VR now has controls for privacy. And even though, the avatars have gone through several reiterations, they continue to be somewhat primitive to perhaps what most of us want to see. Next slide, Emory. And what we also see is sort of the research of these similar to Second Life worlds, like Vribala and Learning Man, which is sort of the earlier conference put by Shaping a US Summer, actually took place. Part of the experience was on Vribala, and where you can create your avatar and you move within the campus and meet others and talk to them. And you can also attend things like a party and take a boat ride. These worlds are now available on the desktop because of access and accessibility, and a lot of us are considering them, knowing what our students have access to. But truthfully, they're much more immersive and on a headset. So moving forward, Emory, the next one, where I think a lot of interesting things are happening, and this is in that intersection between games and social VR. This is Star Trek VR. And it's a game type of environment, which is collaborative. Like, you have to actually be part of a team. You, if they're not four members, then there's an AI that kind of steps in and gets involved. But you have to be a co-creator, a co-decision maker, in order to actually move further into into the game, in some other simulations, you actually have to work with others. You have to collaborate, and definitely these type of experiences driving further the notions of presence and agency. And I think the sort of the it's what's to see to come more in education. But it's also interesting that in some of these, for example, facial expressions are very rudimentary. They don't play such a big role. It's much more the dynamics of co actually existing, and collaborating that um, drives the sort of the game and ultimately the mission forward. But it's an excellent example of basically game based, mission based type of educational opportunities that exist today. Moving forward, and Emory, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Yeah, I'll take it from here. Yeah. There's some other stuff that comes out here, which is also really interesting, is that users seem much more comfortable in immersive environments when others are present as avatars. We're just by nature, we're social creatures. And when we go in an immersive environment and we're there by ourselves, it's kind of unsettling in a way. When we're there with someone else, of course, the first thing we do is we take our clues from how other people are interacting with the environment, and of course, interacting with us, because it reaffirms our presence in the environment itself. The other thing that comes up here is there have been studies that have been done that suggest that we could use more evidence here, obviously, but or they're pointing to the idea that people find information more trustworthy when it is delivered via an avatar, when it is delivered via an embodied person in an immersive environment, as opposed to just the text on the wall or something else or some other way of sharing the information. That we trust having a conversation with a real person and valuing what they say, we will project that onto our avatars in our virtual environments. And of course, along with this, there's a whole host of psychological dynamics that are going to come into play here, which is that there's this sense of of how we interact with each other, and our avatars shape how other people interact with us, because of course we take all those things that we have from the real world, all those gender, race issues that we have in our actual physical world, they're going to come into play in our virtual world. They're going to be very, very, they already have been real in the, as Maya said, in like in All-Space VR and VR chat. But as we move into this in the future, we're going to have to deal with this, just as we've had to deal with it in social media. The XR Safety Initiative, XRSI, is an interesting nonprofit group that's been working on some of the issues here, and they issued a study for, actually, report, 45-page report, September 2020. It's available online, about recommendations for privacy issues. These don't just cover avatars, it really cover everything XR, but so many of them do pertain to avatars. And these are critical issues here. From a 2018 study, a 20-minute VR game session may record up to 2 million data points about your body movement, which is utterly astonishing when you think about it. Just 20 minutes will give 2 million data points about your body. The question is then, who controls that data? Who gets access to it? There's obviously tremendous advantages for assessment in learning here, but there's also tremendous downsides. Yes, it would be nice to know that our students are more engaged. We love it, those of us that can get data on students watching videos, for example, on online courses, to see that they watched something the whole way through, or even where they stopped watching or what they went back and watched again, because then we know what are the important points. That kind of data is really good for us. But XR is also going to bring us massive amounts of data that we really have to ask ourselves, should we have all this, or is it in the province? Is it owned by the institution, or is it owned by an outside company? I mean, this is good right here as a beginning, but of course the real issue is going to be with this framework is whether the other Silicon Valley companies are willing to support this initiative in their own work in XR. And I can give you actually, I'll pass on something because it's just, I don't want to get too far behind here because we're almost running out of time. So some questions here that I think we all need to think about in this as we move into this world, which is how much freedom should we give participants in selecting their own avatars? We don't want to mandate it necessarily. On the other hand, we may have to put some kind of limits on it. How do we handle provocative, aggressive avatars? Obviously, in real life, if somebody comes in class, it's not just us mandating a dress code. The society as a whole mandates a dress code, and there's peer pressure in terms of dress code. So we oftentimes don't really have to deal with those kind of issues. But in an immersive environment, that's going to be very different, and we may have to address those. How do we address privacy concerns and access issues? Because they're going to play a major role here. We will have eye tracking in our VR headsets within the next 2 years. I think it's going to become a standard feature. It's going to be absolutely amazing. It will help with the realism of our avatars, but of course it immediately raises privacy issues. And finally, how can we leverage the developments in avatars to support new modes of learning? Because this is going to be the opportunity for us in the future to not just teach in screens, but to teach actually in virtual spaces. To go back to that very beginning, that quote that Maya used from Jeremy Bailenson, that VR is not media, VR is an experience. Just very quickly, we have a couple more minutes left. We can just look at some very quick ethical issues here. Maya, do you want to just touch on Lucy from Fable Studios?
Sure. So I think this is a very interesting experience because Lucy starts as you enter her world and you first enter her world as a visitor of her world. But at certain point of the experience, Lucy actually comes to you and talks to you and looks you up in the eye, and then she outlines your hands. And this is the moment when she actually gives you the sense of presence. That not only is the sense you are immersed in her world, she recognizes you by being in the world. And then she gives you hands. So you have agency in the world. So the sense of, it's a completely, it's a wonderful story. She gives you the opportunity to actively participate with her in the experience. It's a fascinating design technique. And you, in some ways, you become part of a character in her story. So I think this will be something that will be integrated going forwards in various ways. This will be also life-changing when we can be living with virtual beings in immersive stories. In other words, these are just projects of what it's to see, of more to come. And you can imagine this being a coach or a mentor, or somebody that will actually kind of be almost close to and know you even better in terms of data as your friends know you. So next, and Emory, do you want to talk about
Sure,
Micah, or shall she?
Yeah, I just talk about it very quickly. Probably the most realistic avatar we've ever seen, and we've encountered her a number of times at Sundance and elsewhere. Micah is a mixed reality avatar from Magic Leap 1, and she's just absolutely breathtaking because, of course, she's not mechanical. She's very, very human-like. She doesn't talk yet, but actually that's better because it's less robotic that way. She's just, her movements are very fluid, and we just found, I know Maya and I did it a number of times, we just found it was almost impossible to ignore her because she was just so realistic that it was just, you couldn't look away. As much as you tried to, you found yourself engaging with her in the way that you would engage with anyone else. So it was an absolutely fascinating experience. We've written about it on our site, so you can take a look more in Micah, and there's much more material online about her. And it's just, I think it's a vision of the future, and it's a vision that, of course, works both ways in terms of amazing opportunities for learning and also profound challenges. So I think we'll end here because we really need to wrap this up. So a final quote from Michael Madry: the critical ethical issue in the future is that any amateur user will be able to generate an avatar that looks like anyone on Earth or anyone who has ever lived, and then animate that avatar to do whatever they like. So if you think we have challenges today with fake news, with deep fake videos, we've only scratched the surface. We have so much more to come, which says to me that education is going to be the critical practice in the future for us to be able to handle this. So thank you very much. And I don't know, we don't have really time to continue the discussion here. If we have a few more minutes, we can stay around. If not, we're always available on our site, digitalbodies.net. And we're always writing about this because it's an issue and a topic that is rapidly changing. It's a very, you feel like you're moving in a river on this because there's constantly new things developing and new issues coming up. And we'd love to continue the conversation some more.
Yes, and we also have been the innovators in the shaping and new innovators in residence at ASU for 2020 last year. We are just wrapping up our project on immersive learning. We are coming to the final phase of our virtual gallery, which we provided a sneak preview yesterday. But it's also the final phase where you get to participate and contribute as both individuals or, through your work or through the work of your students or institutions or others. And so to get updates on how you can do that, I've just also shared the sign up form, which is where you can provide some information and you'll be hearing from us. But thank you so much for being here today, for being curious. This is, again, like a field that is so rapidly developing. It's fascinating to see what's taking place in these virtual worlds and virtual beings and avatars. And we always, as Emory said, try to keep up to date by sharing some of this work through organizations and conferences like this one, as well as on our site, digitalbodies.net.
Yeah, and please be part of the Shaping EDU community because it's a really wonderful group of forward-thinking educators and leaders who are wrestling with so many issues for the future and so many opportunities that we have. And it's a very special place to be. So if you're not part of it now, please make an effort to participate more because I think the rewards are very much there. So thank you very much and look forward to seeing you all in the future and have a great day.